Mommy, you came! Bella chirped excitedly in her cheerful voice, leaping and nestling in Daniella's firm embrace. Daniella felt pure joy as she held little Bella in her arms. Her life was now devoid of sadness and pain, and had been replaced with love and happiness. She had been with Wisdom for 5 months now, and had shared only beautiful moments with him. She never imagined she would be that happy or have a family that loved and adored her. Bella had begun calling her mommy. She must have felt so lonely without her biological mother around. "Are you ready? Let's go home," Daniella said to Bella, finally letting each other go. Things were starting to look up in the last 5 months. Daniella's mother had begun chemotherapy, and she was responding to treatment. Daniella had also gotten a job that changed her life for the better. One day, as Daniella browsed through rows of beverages at the supermarket, she bumped into a lady with a scarf over her head and dark shades on. She almost dropped all that she had purchased, but was able to balance herself. "Can't you watch where you're going?" the woman asked, with a voice laced with anger and bitterness. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to bump into you. Are you okay?" The rude woman went on to insult and belittle her in front of everyone at the supermarket, ignoring her apologies and attempts to settle. Unable to bear the insult, Daniella defended herself and warned the woman to be careful with her words. The woman got even angrier and called her a slut and a husband snatcher. Daniella was taken aback by her hateful words and accusations. Why would a total stranger call her a man snatcher and a slut? The supermarket's manager finally managed to settle the argument and asked the duo to exit her store. Outside, the strange woman left her with a warning. "Don't you dare take what is mine," she said, and zoomed off. Daniella mulled over the events that took place at the store on her drive home. She didn't know who that woman was, and for all she knew, she had never stolen anyone's husband. Then, it finally dawned on her who the rude woman could be. Wisdom had told her very little about his ex-wife. She had hurt him terribly and had abandoned him with little Bella, leaving the country with her lover. He hadn't told her more than that. He hated even the mention of her name. She made up her mind to ask Wisdom's mother about it. She didn't want to bring up the topic without being sure that his ex-wife was the person who had harassed her at the supermarket. With that thought, she headed for Mrs. Smith's house. On reaching there, she pleaded with her to tell her what had happened between Wisdom and his ex-wife. She was able to hide her true nature and fooled every one of us, Mrs. Smith began. They had dated each other for about 6 months before Wisdom decided that he would marry her. At first, I was against it, saying that it was so short a time to get to know someone and make the decision to spend the rest of his life with her. But I gave in, seeing how in love they were. She also got pregnant with his child, and that was the icing on the cake. So they got married, and everything was smooth until Bella was born. She was born prematurely and had some birth complications that affected her health. She was a sickly child, and my son spent a lot taking care of her and keeping her alive. Mrs. Smith went on to narrate how Janet's attitude suddenly changed when their finances began to dwindle because of all they had to spend for Bella's treatment. During that time, Wisdom lost his job as well. He had made many mistakes at work because his mind was not settled, which led to the company kicking him out. All Wisdom was left with was the savings he had made over the years and hoped to start a business with, as well as foot Bella's bill. Wisdom came home one day to find out that Janet had withdrawn all of his savings and had left the country with her newfound lover. All she left was a note and a sum of 20,000 naira for a grown man with a child. Daniella drove back home with a heavy heart. No wonder Wisdom didn't want to talk about her. He had had to start life over from scratch and had built his company from the ground up. Daniella made up her mind to protect her man and make sure Janet wouldn't destroy all he had built. They were her family now, and she would do anything for them. Few days later, Daniella called Wisdom on the phone and asked him to go pick up Bella from school since she would be working late. Wisdom went to her school expecting to see her waiting for him at the gate like she used to. He was surprised when he couldn't find her. Panic washed over him suddenly and he called out her name, searching every nook and cranny for her. The teacher, looking after her, had gone into the bathroom to relieve herself, only to come out to find Mr. Smith looking for his daughter. His phone rang suddenly and he picked up. A very familiar voice sounded through the speaker, causing him to shudder in anger. "I knew you wouldn't want to see me if I just asked you to. You made me go this far," Janet said when Wisdom had followed her instructions and met with her at a restaurant. "Kidnapping my child was the best you could do? She's my child too, don't forget. I carried her for 7 months and almost lost my life while birthing her. And you abandoned her after that, knowing that she needed you by her side." Everything Janet said made him angrier as he listened to her. She made countless excuses for why she did what she did. It turned out that the lover she left with was also a fraud. He had given her the wrong time to arrive at the airport, and by the time she got there, he had left the country already with the money they were supposed to enjoy together. She had gone back to her hometown, afraid of running into Wisdom in the city. Life hadn't been good to her since. She struggles to survive and provide for herself. She didn't think of going back to Wisdom because she thought she had rendered him useless and completely broke. Little did she know that fortune had smiled on him again and that he was living his best life. She happened to see Wisdom on television when he was invited for a show for entrepreneurs. He was looking sleek in his tailored suit and his skin glowed. He didn't look like he had aged a bit. Bella was seated in the crowd watching her father's interview, and the camera had captured her. She saw how healthy and beautiful her once sickly child was and knew at once that she had made a huge mistake leaving them. She also got another shocker when he introduced a beautiful woman as his fiancée. She made the decision there and then to get him back and be reunited with her family. After all, they were still married on paper. Wisdom stood up angrily from his seat and warned Janet never to contact him again or come close to his daughter. "I don't like that woman. She keeps saying she's my mother. She says Mommy Daniella is bad and is trying to steal me from her," Bella said when he picked her from the children's playground and tucked her into the seatbelt. "Don't worry, Peaches. You won't be seeing her again. Forget everything she has told you," Wisdom replied and drove off. Wisdom came home and was in a sour mood all evening. Daniella noticed his countenance and asked what the problem was. Wisdom finally opened up to her and told her everything that happened between him and Janet. He also told her the events of that day, confirming Daniella's suspicion that Janet was the woman who had approached her at the store. She hadn't been abroad after all. Daniella also told him about her encounter with that woman at the supermarket and her suspicion that it was indeed Janet who had harassed her. Wisdom was furious at her audacity. How could she think there was ever a chance that they'd get back together after everything she had done? It was obvious that it was greed that brought her back again. She had seen how wealthy he was now and how great his life was going. Wisdom went into his office one morning and found Janet already waiting for him. She looked breathtaking in the very revealing dress she wore. It was obvious her intent was to seduce him and have him wrapped around her finger. His staff apologized and explained that they had tried to stop her, but she had forced her way in. Janet, a seductive smile planted on her lips, introduced herself as his wife to his staff, saying they had had a bit of a misunderstanding and she had to leave. She informed them that she was back now and they had settled their differences. Wisdom pulled her into his office and dropped a divorce paper on her laps, which she bared before him. Janet, saying that her charms could do nothing to move his heart, threatened to take all that he had and milk him dry if he were to divorce her. She would make hefty demands as alimony. Daniella entered into the office just then and dared her to try her best. She replied that she would do everything to stop her from hurting her family again. Janet left in anger and swore they wouldn't be happy together. It should have been her beside Wisdom and not that gold-digging slut, she thought to herself. Janet, true to her word, got a lawyer and requested a huge amount of all Wisdom had. If she couldn't get him back, she could get some money from him at least. A few days to the hearing, Wisdom and Daniella paid her a surprise visit and told her that her previous lover, with whom she defrauded him and planned to elope, had been caught. He had done the same to another woman who had outsmarted him. He would be their witness in court that she was a fraud and a thief who had robbed him and fled, leaving her baby who was less than a year old. The court would realize that she wasn't fit to be a mother. They would also sue her for theft, so even if the court did award her any of his money, they would get it back from the lawsuit. At that moment, Janet realized she was defeated. She had no option than to sign the divorce papers. Now officially divorced, Wisdom and Daniella could now plan their wedding they had held off for a while now. The wedding date was fixed and both families looked forward to the day with much anticipation. On the day of the wedding, however, Daniella's vehicle was intercepted by a group of thugs who dragged her and little Bella into their car and zoomed off. Her bridesmaid immediately called Wisdom, informing him of what had happened. They called the police and the search for them began. The vehicle had been caught on the CCTV cameras, and with that, they were traced to an abandoned building at the outskirts of town. The police arrived just when Janet had her gun pointed at Daniella. She was ordered to put her gun down and was subdued by the police. Janet was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment for kidnapping and attempted murder. She was also sued for fraud and theft. Wisdom and Daniella got married and spent the rest of their lives together in marital bliss.